Awesome. I was waiting for like the Zoom robot lady to come in and say it was being recorded, but I guess that doesn't happen here. Awesome. Well, hello everyone. I'm Nick Carbone. Super excited to be here. I am the go-to-market manager for Operations Hub, as well as our enterprise CRM. So really what that means is like I'm concerned with what we're building, the strategy behind it, how we sell it, how we service it, how our customers are using it, feedback we're getting, that sort of thing. So I work with our product folks, really just to make sure that that what we're doing with Operations Hub is resonating in the market and just people feel good about it. I'm just here to help the hub grow, basically. I joined HubSpot almost 5 years ago, actually, back in 2017, and we only had two hubs back then. And it's wild to think that now, like here I am for you all on like our fifth hub. So there's been a ton of growth while I've been at HubSpot. It's been crazy to see. And I came from onboarding. I started off there, worked a few years on that team. If you all have ever like worked with that team, I think if you've come in as a new customer and like had an onboarding specialist help you out for the first couple months, that's what I spent some time doing before I moved over to work on Sales Hub go-to-market strategy. And now I'm working on Operations Hub. Personally, I live and work in Raleigh, North Carolina. So a bit rainy here today, honestly, but hoping it warms up soon. It's been nice. I used to live in Boston, and it's been wonderful having this kind of winter and not a northern winter for the first time in forever. Um, but I really like things like CRM implementations. I know it sounds kind of nerdy, but that's how I ended up here on Operations Hub and CRM. Also a big golf fan, and I love breakfast. So if we want to chat about breakfast sometime, maybe in the chat during this meeting, happy to do so. We're going to talk though about Opshub as much as I would like to talk about breakfast and golf and stuff like that. Today we're going to talk first about who and what Operations Hub solves for. So really that's going to break down into like a couple, things. We'll talk about like the market problem we're addressing, the personas we're solving for, what is Opshub overall. Um, but we'll spend the balance of our time or the majority of the time today talking about like what Opshub actually is, and that'll be done with a feature overview, some use cases, best practices. I'll hop into the tool at a couple different points, and then I've left a decent chunk of time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. But like we were saying before, like feel free to drop stuff in the chat. I'll pop back and forth and try to clean up questions as we go. But want to make this participatory. Want to basically give you all what you want and what you need out of this session. So first off, I get asked all the time. We're a new hub. We're like, I think almost a year old. It'll be April is our first birthday, so coming up on it. But we're pretty new. So people ask me all the time, like, hey, like, what's Operations Hub? High level, it's a data and process enablement tool. And what that means is like we're building Operations Hub to help customers more efficiently manage how their data is moved through the system and through other systems and how it's used. And with the goal in mind of like just making sure that we're streamlining mission critical business processes within the CRM. And we built Operations Hub with some different folks in mind. So first and foremost, of course, we built it with ops professionals, data leaders, and HubSpot admins in mind, like the folks that are like, you know, with their job title responsible for doing the things that might fall under like the umbrella of operations. But we also built it with like this HubSpot person, quote unquote, in mind, because we know that like not everyone has a dedicated ops team or ops person in their company, but they always will, for the most part, have someone that's been asked or tasked with building connecting and really fixing everything inside HubSpot for their team. So we know that we're kind of building for two personas because ops isn't always a defined role. Again, like larger or bigger, whatever, more or older companies might have a rev ops or sales ops team, but we know a lot of our customers don't yet. And really, ops to us is just this underlying set of systems, processes, and responsibilities that are going to help businesses of all sizes fight friction and grow better. And these responsibilities boil down into what we call the three Ps. And we got really lucky here because the three things we were building for all started with P. So we've been able to use this like cool alliteration and the three Ps framework to talk about OpsHub. But at a super high level, the things that we feel our customers care about or should care about are platform, process, and perspective. So number one is platform. Like how can we get every team that's working in HubSpot the information they need to do their jobs, and even teams outside of HubSpot. Sometimes information has to leave HubSpot for folks to do their jobs. How can we make sure that that's happening as well? The second big thing that we care about, or we know ops folks and people responsible for operations care about, is process. So if we know all of our data is in the right place, people have like the tools to do their job, but how can we make sure that that job is easy? Like we've given them, the tools they need to assemble a car. Can we make the assembly line run a little bit better, right? Can we make the information that they're using consistent? Can it be an efficient process? And ideally, can we automate that process when and where it makes sense? And the third big thing that we know our customers care about and operations folks care about is perspective. So if everyone's doing their jobs, the data's moving around, everything's looking good, like we want to learn from that and continue to grow and continue to get better. And that really, it's basically reporting. But how can we use all this stuff that's happening inside and outside of our CRM that's connected to HubSpot to get some cool business insights and drive our business strategy? Um, it all sounds good and like super clean cut on that slide before, but we know that like all too often managing those three P's is really hard. And it's like this guy, right? Like I love these infomercials where people just fail miserably at like normal tasks, but this is how it can feel when you're juggling asks from different teams and trying to be that person that's responsible for all the HubSpot systems and questions and troubleshooting and all that. So we know that this is an issue, and that's what Operations Hub is trying to solve for. So we know that, like the guy trying to carry all the car wash stuff in the previous slide, operations and people that are in this kind of operations role right now, they feel like they're reactive. They feel like the business isn't running as quickly or as efficiently as it could. And ultimately, that leads to like a fragmented customer experience because when things aren't right behind the scenes, very often that will translate and like at least be visible or noticeable to the customers you're working with. So we want to move from like this legacy ops kind of situation or era into like today's ops or tomorrow's ops, even where people that are responsible for these things, they feel like strategic, they feel like things are seamless. They feel like they're like, they're proactive instead of reactive, and ultimately that's going to impact the customer experience and make it as close to flawless as we can possibly get. And like I've been kind of suggesting, and like the title of the presentation today suggests, Operations Hub can help us get to this place on the right where this lady is like standing very nicely and quietly at a drafting table instead of fighting a house that's on fire. So this looks better to me. So we'd like to get people from here to this other slide. So thinking back at those three Ps, like high level, that's our product philosophy, right? Like platform, process, and perspective. When we build the product, we kind of translate that into actionable or kind of um, I guess more detailed or just more descriptive feature groups. And those feature groups kind of align with AP. And the first is integrations or just integrating. And that aligns with platforms, so connecting systems. We have in Operations Hub data sync. We have 100 plus apps now that you can connect with HubSpot through Operations Hub that offer a real-time two-way sync as well as a historical data sync. So we can really make sure that we're speaking to that platform piece and people are getting information where they need it. The second thing that we've built, the second feature group, is around automation, and that aligns really well with our process philosophy. So we have things like custom code actions, data quality automation, and scheduled workflow triggers that help teams just work better, more efficiently, and automate more processes inside of HubSpot. And the third feature group over here on the far right side is reporting, and that aligns with perspective. Of course, I mentioned that was reporting earlier, but we have tools like data sets, formula fields and calculations in reports, and our new Snowflake integration that really speak to that perspective piece. Okay, that was like high level. Gonna jump into a feature overview now, but first I'm gonna take a sip of water and check. Okay, no questions in the chat, but I'm gonna keep pressing forward with the feature overview. So we're going to talk about this in like kind of through the lens of the P's, of the three P's. So the first, again, is platform, and that corresponds largely with data sync and with integrations in Operations Hub. So I mentioned it before, but we've got this really awesome real-time data sync between HubSpot and now over 100 platforms. I think we launched with like 20 or 30 of these, and in less than a year, the team has just been hammering away, continually adding both new integrations and new features. So what data sync allows you to do is you can see this first screenshot over here on the right where we have in-app a way to connect HubSpot with, in this case, Dynamics. And like I mentioned before, you can choose if you want a one-way or two-way sync. You can customize your sync rules. You can customize your mappings in Opshub Starter. And you can have a historical sync and now sync health monitoring. So you've got some like error handling and troubleshooting features that we've just launched this month. So the team has really worked hard to make this a turnkey, like super easy way to connect HubSpot with tons of other systems. We're super excited. Later this year, we're going to come out with more advanced segmentation capabilities. So like being able to stack filters, being able to use different logic when you're configuring what should sync and when. And we're also going to make sure that we're adding new mapping types. So things like drop-down fields and that kind of thing. We want to be able to sync those to other systems as well. So that's cool. Like we talked a bit about the feature, but how would you actually use this? And you can see here on the right, like here's like when I'm actually configuring excuse me, a sync, you might have like several apps in your tech stack, right? And you might not be able to migrate everything to HubSpot for whatever reason. Like you might have, a sales team that's like just super passionate or super entrenched in Dynamics or Pipedrive or something like that. But you're working on marketing in HubSpot. You'd like to make sure that things are staying in step. We can do that. We can do that with data sync. And you might not want or might not need to build an integration from scratch via API, or we don't need to use custom code sometimes. So you'd set up one of these super easy, lightweight syncs, maybe to send MQLs from your marketing campaigns over to Dynamics, and then sync those deals that are being worked in a CRM like Dynamics or Pipedrive or something like that back to HubSpot for some really good closed loop reporting. We could also sync contacts, maybe from Intercom to HubSpot. So if you're getting chats to your support team in Intercom, we could keep that information up to date and keep the contact information up to date in HubSpot. We could also think about doing things or syncing something like billing contacts and their billing information, like at least address and title and like role and that kind of thing, from HubSpot over to something like Zero. So there's tons of these use cases that just keep HubSpot connected with the other systems that you might be using. Okay, another quick pause to check the chat if there are any questions about data syncing. It looks like there's a couple. So the difference between a one-way and a two-way sync is a two-way sync would allow me to do something like say, hey, if a contact or a deal is created in Dynamics, I'd like to move that to HubSpot. And then if I update it in HubSpot, I'd like to push it back to Dynamics as well. So it means information can flow from one system to the other in both directions. Uh, or was that one way or two way? So one way would be a one way push. Sorry, I had that backwards. So if I want to do something and say, hey, I just want information to flow from HubSpot to Dynamics, I could do that. Like contacts are MQL'd, they move over to CRM, and that's it. I don't want to see that contact again. We could do that. Or what the thing that's more common is to set up a two-way sync where I say, hey, I want to send this MQL to my sales team who's working in Dynamics, but then I want to update that contact record as they add new properties and change things and do whatever they're doing on that contact record in Dynamics. So information is flowing both ways. Second question, is data sync different from how we currently use integrations from the HubSpot app marketplace? It is and it isn't in some ways, and I'll expand on that. So data sync is built on the framework of a company called PieSync that we acquired a couple years ago. They were best in class iPaaS solution, and we bought them. We integrated their platform with what we do. So there's a natively built, a HubSpot built, HubSpot managed, HubSpot supported way to integrate with other platforms. And if you saw the slide before, we've got a way in app to manage this. And some of our ecosystem integrations, of course, will take you out of HubSpot or maybe not have a place to manage this in app. Like I mentioned before, too, it's also supported by us because we built it. So you can actually call into our support team and get help here. But the biggest thing I like to say, like the biggest differences could come from what data is synced back and forth. So when you're looking to integrate with HubSpot, the number one thing I tell customers is to figure out like what data you want to sync and when you want to sync it. And that's going to help you determine which integration option is best. So with data sync, we can sync objects, their associations, and object properties. And if that works, that's perfect. In some cases, the ecosystem integrations will sync less data. They might sync a little more data. They might sync different data. So it really just depends on what your use case for the integration is and which option you choose. And how do I get to Opshub? Oh, sorry, I skipped the question. I have a commercial real estate client interested in syncing data from CoStar. Do you know how, or do you know if this is available for HubSpot and or where I can find a list of compatible platforms? That's a great question. I can share in a bit, but we do have, if you go to the app marketplace, there is a tab, I think on the left-hand side for data sync built by HubSpot or apps for our operations team, as we might call it. And that's going to have a list, I think, of all like 112 or something like that integrations that we've built so far. I'm not sure specifically about CoStar. I can follow up on that. I know the team has like a pretty long list of things that they want to build, and we do prioritize those based on the number of asks we receive and feedback we get from customers. And how do I get to Opshub? That's you're asking the $1 million question. It's something that we've been working on. We don't have a nav button right now, and as much as I would love to have one, it lives in different places because these features are meant to be additive to other hubs. They live within the platform. So with data sync, you're going to get to that from like the little house icon that takes you to the marketplace. And if you go to connected apps, you'd see any sync apps that you've connected that way. And we'll talk in a bit about some of the automation tools and reporting tools, but those also live within tools like workflows Data sets, our new tool lives under the reports fly down. So they just kind of live, and they've integrated nicely with existing nav options and existing tools within the platform. Cool. So we talked data sync, we talked platform, we talked integrations. The second big feature group is process, and process was automation. So we're really excited. We've got a bunch of features in automation within Opshub, or a bunch of features that help supercharge automation with Opshub. The first being our newest feature, scheduled workflow triggers. And this is basically the ability to set up a recurring workflow. So if you see over here on the right, I've got this schedule option now that's unlocked with Opshub from like the main workflow setup page. And in this case, I've chosen, hey, I want this workflow to run 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m. And so we've seen customers set up these kinds of recurring workflows for task creation, like if they want, every day their sales team to get, the 5 big tasks assigned to them for the day, something like that. We've also seen it combined with programmable email. We had one customer that was sending out, actually, I think it was a real estate customer, or a realtor, or something like that, was sending out um, a customized email once a week with listings personalized for that customer. So kind of like a newsletter, but more personalized than that. They used a scheduled workflow trigger to set that up and send it out at the right time. We've also seen a lot of customers using this for scheduled data cleanup. So I'm going to talk in a sec about data quality automation, but we've seen customers say, hey, like every Friday at 6 p.m. after everything's cooled off for the week, I want to go back through the CRM and like capitalize the first letter of everyone's first name just to make sure we're everything's clean and ready to go. Perfect segue. I just mentioned data quality automation. So we know, like, when you're thinking about managing a HubSpot portal, or just managing operations, or managing data like at a high level, like data quality is super, super important, and it can actually be really painful. And we know that it costs time and money when you can't rely on the data in your CRM. And OpsHub, we're working on addressing that problem and helping folks change that. So we've got this workflow action, which I'll show in more detail here in a sec. But within workflows, you can choose format data and apply different functions or different operations to data that might be in that workflow. So in this case, I've chosen to capitalize text string, so the first name of a contact. But we've also seen folks use this for date formatting. That's a tool that we have, or a function we have. You can add and subtract units of time from a date. So if we want to say, hey, like, I know dates come into my system when a customer first signs on with us, but I'd like to have that date actually changed to 90 days out when I need to reach out about a renewal, or reach out about activation or something like that. You can also do like simple math in these properties. So if we know, like, hey, a customer comes in with a value of 5 in a property and I want to multiply that by 10, we can do that. And there's tons of other use cases that I'll show in a sec when we're in the tool. So I'm going to change which tab I am sharing. Cool, and you should see the workflow now. Interrupt me if I'm sharing the wrong screen. But in this use case, we are using a scheduled workflow trigger. So this workflow is going to run, maybe clicked on the wrong thing, but it's going to run every day or every week on Friday at 9 p.m. We're going to enroll all contacts that have a first name or a last name that's known in the system. And we're going to use this data format action to choose our property first. I've chosen first name. Could choose any text property on this contact though, and capitalize the first letter, and then just map that right back to the first name property on the contact record. So imagine like you're sending an email, or a sales rep is using a personalization token in a template or a sequence. We don't want like Nick to receive like lowercase NICK. That looks kind of bad. Doesn't set a, or it doesn't make a great first impression. So like we just want to make sure, like in this use case, like, hey, we're capitalizing first and last name. And this is as simple as setting up, in this case, what's maybe a 3 or 4 step 4 action workflow. Um, cool. Any questions on those two pieces of automation and Operations Hub? So scheduled workflow triggers and the data format action. Cool. Could you use this type of workflow to retroactively clean up data from open field text fields? Yeah, you 100% could. So you would just want to change the enrollment trigger for the workflow. So like is known would actually work. It would actually reach back into the CRM depending on how you configured the settings, I believe. you'd want to say like, hey, like enroll existing contacts that meet the workflow criteria, but you could totally do this for historical data. And yes, Madison, we hear that a lot. Like people just get like, just people like can't type for some reason, even if it's their own name or they like autofill something, who knows? Like it's just easy to set something up. Like if I were to pop into this workflow and say, hey, like when a form is submitted, take this contact and clean up all the data fields I've collected from that form. That's totally doable. You just want to change the enrollment trigger and probably not use a scheduled trigger. You'd probably just want to have that go as a normal workflow. Okay, so we've talked about these two data quality actions and the scheduled workflow trigger, but there's also this huge other piece of automation in Opshub Pro called programmable automation. And we've built out these couple features, which we'll talk about more in a sec, just to make automation as flexible as we possibly can. And the first thing that's in here is custom code actions. So custom code actions essentially allow you to write and run code from within a workflow action or a bot. So if I were to come in here back into my workflow, add an action, I'm going to see this option to add code. And I'm not going to go super in depth here. I'm not technical enough to write code, so I don't want to butcher anything basically. But we're able to write in two different net languages. One is Node.js, the second is Python, which we just added. But you'd essentially come in here and you'd write the code. We have a way to open up the code window, and you would just code either in Python or JS and be able to do tons of different things within a workflow. So I know I'm triggering this workflow. When this workflow happens, I need to execute some code. That can happen from within a HubSpot workflow now. The reason why we've built this and the reason why we just have this super open-ended custom code action is because we know that our customers are sophisticated and complex and just unique. And we basically need a way to have workflows solve for things that standard workflow actions can't or might not be able to even in the future. And some examples here of that, I'm going to skip a couple. I like lead rotation or territory management. These are things that are very unique to some customers. Like they might have just a complex or just like a very customized lead rotation or lead assignment model or rule set. We can't account for all that when we build our standard object assignment action in a workflow. But we do now have this like open-ended code action where you'd be able to say, hey, like I'm actually going to code out a bunch of statements and a bunch of rules that govern who gets assigned what lead. So that's one really good example. We've seen customers use this just to like do stuff in the CRM, like just to complete tasks that are on a closed deal. Like we don't want to have the rep have to go back and like manually close out all the tasks that she or he have created on that deal and maybe forgotten about. So if it's closed, we'll close all the tasks. You can also use custom code actions to reach outside of HubSpot and pull data back in or do things in other systems. So much like you'd have a custom integration built between HubSpot and another system via API, we can do that kind of similar stuff within these workflow actions. We can hit API endpoints. Again, we can like retrieve data from other systems. We can update data in other systems. We can pull that back into HubSpot. There's really no limits to what you can do because we have the ability to write and run code from within a workflow action. Last two use cases I like that I wanted to include in here. Number one, or one of the last ones, is advanced record deduplication. So we know that like right now, we deduplicate contacts based on email address and we deduplicate companies based on domain. But sometimes you might have a unique identifier. You might have like an account number or like even like a contact phone number that we use for deduplication. You could do that with a custom code workflow action. You could look back through your database, check for existing phone numbers or account numbers. And if someone's trying to create a record that matches, we could flag that record or even delete it or merge it if we wanted to. And we've also seen folks connect HubSpot with business intelligence services or even like an email validation service. That's been a big one, just to either enrich the data in the CRM or to double check data in the CRM. Like back to that example or the chat we got about bad data through a form. Hey, let's capitalize first and last name. Oh yeah, and we'll also ping this external service to double check that this email address is actually valid and we're not going to waste time in like an email send on someone that put in a fake email. I'd love to say that I thought up all of these examples, but we do, or I didn't, because we have this amazing use case library now. So we have a whole team of folks at HubSpot that have been submitting these, that have been like vetting these, but you can come back through and sort of check out what's possible with programmable automation and custom code actions, and even check out the code and just grab this code from us and edit it and use it on your own if you'd like to. On that note, I said I'm not technical enough to write code. I wasn't lying. It's tough. Like I'll be honest, it's not the easiest thing in HubSpot to do, right? We know writing code, whether that's like JS or whether it's HTML or CSS, like styling stuff, it's not simple, but we know that. So we know, or we'd like to have ways for our customers to get help. Number one thing I'll call out in terms of getting help is our dedicated TC blocks. So our technical consultants can help advise and kind of consult on a project if you know you'd like to build and run and use one of these custom code actions. As I'm sure you all are aware, we have an amazing network of partners, many of whom are amazing at these kind of custom code actions or just coding and custom integrations in general. We've referred folks over to them for help with custom code actions and this kind of advanced process automation, and then each other. So I think like one way we're helping customers kind of stay in touch is with this library. We have customers submitting these, but we also have the developer forums and the community forums where we have tons of folks talking about custom code actions as well. One thing I should have added on here that I have not yet, because it's kind of new, we actually have a ton of content coming out of our community, like a webinar. We have a master class that one of our solutions engineers put on where it's like 4 whole hours of walking through how to build and use custom code actions. We've had office hours with some of our product managers that build and maintain these tools. So we've got tons of help for you out there. We don't want to make it seem like, hey, like, it's custom code, it's scary. It can be complicated, but we have ways to make it easy and to help you get there. Okay, I'm going to pause and check the chat. So wildly helpful. I'm glad. Are there any Academy courses for writing custom code actions in workflows? Not yet, but I actually met with one of our Academy professors in the last couple weeks, and that is on their radar and something we're working on. But that master class that I just mentioned would be a great resource. So I can link that in the chat in a few minutes. I'll grab that link. But one of our SEs, Jack Koldrick, did again like 4 hours of master class tutorials on how to build a custom code action. It's actually really great. Could custom code overwrite HubSpot's restriction of setting lifecycle stages backwards automatically? Yeah, because you're just updating a property. And if that's accessible via API, which it is, I believe we should be able to overwrite that and say, hey, like, we could use whatever workflow trigger we need to write code and then move that lifecycle stage backwards if you wanted to. I know we're also working on customizable lifecycle stages. I'm not super close to that work, but I'd stay tuned for some big updates around lifecycle stages because we know that flexibility there is a big ask from our customers. And yeah, plus one on dedupe. That's actually been a huge use case, specifically internationally. We work with a lot of LATAM customers recently, or worked with a couple recently that were deduping on tax ID and things like that. That's a big one that they want to dedupe on, I think specifically in Chile and Ecuador. Cool. So I've talked through Opshub Starter with Platform. I've talked through Pro with Process, and now is Enterprise. So our newest tier and the perspective piece of the 3 Ps. So again, perspective and reporting, we really just want to make sure that people that truly care or are responsible for their data model and for insights in HubSpot have the tools they need to get the insights that they need or their team needs. So we built this tool in Operations Hub Enterprise called Datasets, and Datasets does really 2 cool things. So number one, it's going to give you more power within reports, and that happens through advanced calculations, formulas, and functions that can now be created within a data set and applied to data that you then build into reports. So more on that in a sec. I'll actually show some use cases. So number one, we added a ton of power to our reporting tool set with data sets. Number two, data sets is essentially, like the way I describe it, is almost like a HelloFresh for reporting, because we're going to create this curated table of data that folks can then use when they're building custom reports that just kind of puts the blinders on and gives them only the ingredients they need to build the reports that we know they need. So if you have like a sales team, or the marketing team only looks at certain data, but people are always asking you questions about what property means what, or like, where do I go to find this data? You can build a data set and they can use that link or that data set basically to jump a few steps in the report builder and access the data that they need. So number one, adding power. Number two, when we add power, we want to make it easy. So I think, like we've been saying internally, like it's like the magic trick we're trying to pull off is to be both powerful and easy to use across the platform. And we think we've done that now with reporting with data sets. So like at a high level, like I just kind of introduced that problem of like accessing data, and it's kind of confusing at the moment, or can be. we know that there's a ton of raw data that's created in the CRM, and we want to eventually get to step 3, where a user is like super easily building a report using data from the CRM. But if you were to skip this step, like you're going to be looking at every single property and every single object in the CRM. It's going to be kind of confusing at times. So data sets fits kind of in between here. So before I build a report, but after I have the data, you'd have an analyst or someone that's just responsible for reporting in HubSpot come in, build this data set by prepping and narrowing down the data from the CRM, and then a user could kind of use that HelloFresh box basically to build or to cook up their report. So before I jump in and actually show data sets, I wanted to talk through some use cases for when you would use calculations or when you would even like want to kind of streamline user access to reports. So what we've seen with data sets and advanced data prep, we've seen folks building custom KPIs within reports with formulas. We've seen them customizing the names of properties, even like just some more flexibility around how reports look in the system. We're using functions to manipulate data. So we've got ways to calculate the difference between two dates. We've got ways to use if functions or conditional statements in reports now. We have ways to even like truncate text or merge two text fields, tons of different stuff, tons of different functions that would essentially allow you to almost have like kind of like Excel or Google Sheets type power within a report in HubSpot. So some examples there would be calculating commissions, margin, return on investment, custom date reporting, merging text. I haven't added a ton of conditional examples on here yet, but if you wanted to calculate like a conditional commission for a sales team, like, hey, if they sell X product, it's 10%, Y product is 15%, that's possible now too. So tons of cool applications for data sets. And I mentioned before, just this like streamlined reporting piece has been huge. So instead of having a list of all objects and properties, we can just show this like streamlined list. I think in this case it's like 7 properties and fields, really easy to digest. So even the average user, someone that's not super familiar with reports or with HubSpot, could come in and build a report really easily. So if I were to pop in, I actually want to show this. I'm inside of a data set right now, but I'm going to back out and actually show the problem we're solving and kind of more about the process. So if I come into the reports tool and go to create a custom report, if I know what I'm doing, this is actually really straightforward and easy to use. Like I choose my objects, I choose my data, my filters, all that, and I build my report. Super easy. But if I don't know what I'm doing, if I'm new to HubSpot or just maybe I'm like a CEO or something and I don't have I'm not in here all the time, I shouldn't have to worry about this. This can be overwhelming, and we know that this generates questions for your ops team or for your HubSpot person or your HubSpot admin. So what we've done is with data sets, we've enabled a way to basically skip a few steps and say, hey, like maybe I want to come in and just look at the data I need to run my deal reports. If I choose that, I'm going to skip a bunch of steps and just see the properties that I know I need to see. And someone has set this up in advance for me. They've pulled in some standard properties. They've calculated a couple custom fields. And all I have to do is drag and drop and build the reports I need. So a little bit more in depth than like a dashboard would be, where someone just wants to come in and like read only. This would give someone a little bit more power to come in and build the reports they need, but it's not too much power or too much information to where we're like overwhelming them in reports. How we got here though is pretty cool, and it's the feature I'm excited about and the tools I'm excited about. So up under reports, you may have seen this new nav option, this new icon for data sets. If you come in here and create a data set, it's going to look a lot like the custom report builder where we're setting up a report. You're going to choose your data source. So in this case, I'm going to say, I'm curious to report on maybe deals and companies. We'll make it a sales use case. And then here's where I'm actually choosing what properties and what fields are going to be available in that data set at the end of the process. So I'm just going to drag and drop from the left. Maybe I care about amount. I care about the owner. And we'll say close date is enough for now. So I've got 3 properties in here. Maybe I don't call it deal owner though. Like that's kind of a HubSpot-y term. Like no one really calls their reps deal owners. At least like that's not their title. So maybe we just want to say like, sales representative or something like that. Like that's how we want it to look in the end report. We can do that now. And I did not change the name of the property in the CRM. I'm only formatting how this looks in the report. So that's like number 1. I can like just basically choose what properties show up in this report, and I can customize them a little bit. But we want to take it a step further and give our customers the power to, again, run those advanced calculations, formulas, and functions to manipulate data and kind of change data and transform data before they report on it. So an example here would be if I'm tracking my deal amounts maybe in monthly revenue, but I'd prefer to run a report in annual revenue, I can define a new field called ARR for annual revenue and just make that deal amount times 12. And that was pretty simple. I mentioned before, I don't write code. I'm pretty good in Excel, but this was easy. Like it didn't take a, like a PhD for me to figure that out. So we're very happy and we're like really pleased that we've added this additional power, but it's super easy to use. We have help for formula guidance. Like if I were to mess this up, we've also added a validation feature to come in and say that there's an issue with the syntax. So um, we're happy to like add more power, but also make it accessible and easy to use. So I've added ARR. That was just a calculation, some simple arithmetic. We've also got a ton of functions available as well. And I kind of touched on this before, but you have the ability to pull in something like a date diff function. And in this case, this is going to calculate in, I think, days, the difference between two dates. So maybe this example, we want to say, hey, the day the company was created to the day the first deal was closed. This is now possible. So that's maybe like we could call this like, life cycle in days. So from when the company was created as a lead to when they were closed as a customer. So things like that, that would have been really tricky to manage through a workflow or through some calculated properties maybe in the past, are pretty easy to do with data sets now. So I've added a couple fields. If I wanted to, I could filter this, could name it. But then once this data set is created, I save it. And then it's available to use in reports like I showed before. So if I were to come in, build my report, instead of this user that I built this data set for having to filter through everything themselves, they just see those 5 properties and fields that I created a second ago. All right, jumping back into the chat just to check that if there's any questions about data sets. So question from Madison, do data sets automatically update like other HubSpot reports? They will, yeah. So the data set, think of the data set almost like a list, like an active list for reports data. So if you create that, new data will be added to the data set as it meets the criteria for that report or for that filter. Cool. So I talked about data sets. That's the first piece of Perspective and Opshub Enterprise. The second big piece and the second feature we launched back at Inbound and then in November of last year was this data share, this integration with Snowflake. So Snowflake being a data warehouse that exists in the cloud. If customers want to export their HubSpot data from Snowflake, we can do that now. And that's a big ask we know from some of our larger customers. Our upmarket customers would like to pass data to Snowflake to curate it and analyze it, and mix it, combine it, transform it with all their other business data and just work it into their existing reporting and data tech stack. So we're really excited for this. We're going to expand coverage for the Snowflake share over this year and next year. So right now, there's a couple regional restrictions on where data needs to be hosted, but we're going to clear those up this year, as well as hopefully add some new data warehouses to the integration as well beyond Snowflake. That was all I had for today. I would love to open up the time for any questions you all have. Happy to answer questions about Opshub, about use cases, demo other features, talk about troubleshooting, whatever we want to use the time for. I'm open for questions. I really like that question. What's your best tip for getting internal buy-in to add this hub? We built Operations Hub to make other hubs run more smoothly. So we're like, well, we're solving for a new persona with operations and with this HubSpot person, right? But ultimately, every tool and every process you build in Operations Hub is going to reduce friction for that other team and just do something uh, better or benefit that other team. So what I would do to get internal buy-in for this hub is to look at the different use cases. So assuming I'm looking at something like Opshub Pro, let's look at maybe are there processes we can automate that have been really tough in the past. This custom code action can clear up, and like how much money or how much time would that save me if every week I don't have to go in and manually do something like lead assignments? Am I going to save a few hours by automating that? And how much is that time worth? Like, what else could I be doing? Then I'd look at things like data quality automation. Like, what's it worth to us if we send out an email, or what could it have been worth if we send out an email with a poorly formatted first name? Like, did we lose some business there? Like, what's our, like, the lifetime value of the average customer? Like, if we do that 10 times, are we losing 10 grand if we lose like a customer or two off that email blast? So I'd look at it that way. Like, how many use cases can I see with each tool, and how much time would that save me? How much customer pain is that going to save? I'd look at it from that angle, I think. Have you experienced much pushback on price or features, or any feedback so far that's influencing updates? We've gotten some feedback on data quality automation, and customers want more of that. So in terms of updates for features, that's where we're spending a good chunk of time and resources this year in Operations Hub. We're really excited for some of the work that we're doing around data management and data quality automation. So helping with imports, helping with duplicate detection, automated merges, just more and better quality cleanup actions. So we're really excited for that investment. I think, like, regarding price, like, we do get a little bit of pushback there, right? Because we are adding a new hub to do some of these things. So if you're thinking about it again from like internal buy-in, um, I would just think like, yeah, if I'm paying full price at 800 bucks a month, is that going to save me $800 a month worth of time? Like, probably more than that, honestly. If you think about, again, like something like lead rotation, or pulling data from an external system, or cleaning up data that you might be doing on your own now once a week in an Excel spreadsheet that's like really miserable and takes you 4 hours, like, what else could you be doing with that time? Or how much time and friction is that going to save a team downstream if, like, your sales team doesn't have to capitalize the letter before they send off a sequence, or worry about that or something? So I'd always try to frame it through like, hey, yeah, we're adding a new product, or we're upping our subscription price, or what have you, but like, we're in reality saving time and reducing friction. Does it make sense that as a company matures in HubSpot using all of the hubs, that it's important to have a HubSpot admin or RevOps specialist? I think 100%. Like, I came from onboarding, and when we had like 3 or 4 hubs, right? Like, we had just added service and CMS. People, I think, could get away with having like a sales manager or a marketing manager manage HubSpot. But as the platform grows and as we add new tools and it gets more powerful, like, that job is just going to get more difficult. I think it's not going to be impossible, but I think some of you probably on the call now are like, hey, like, I have a full-time job, but my part-time job now is suddenly managing a HubSpot portal. Like, I think it's super important to start thinking about an admin or a RevOps specialist, or just someone that really thinks overall about the health of the portal and the systems, and just how they're connected, what we can improve, process, automation, that kind of thing. Would you say Opshub works better for B2B or B2C? And then within that, small to medium businesses or enterprises? I think, like, I'll just say like yes to that question. I think it works really well for all use cases, and that's not me being like a HubSpot employee who works on Operations Hub and being biased. I think we have ways for everybody to use it. Like, we see a lot of B2C companies that have tons of different apps that work really well for their like niche use cases, but they still want to use HubSpot. So that would be a great use case for data sync, for tying together things like MailChimp or Pipedrive or whatever that you're using as a B2C into the CRM. For B2B, like, I think it's fair to say we see our most sophisticated and most demanding customers in the B2B side of things. And they definitely get benefits out of like the Snowflake data share, data sets, custom code actions for sure. Like, just customers and business models that like are just like more, I think, customized, or more like sophisticated, more niche. They definitely get benefits out of OpsHub as well. And with like regard to size, we see everything. Like, we have tons and tons and tons of starter customers that purchase OpsHub, again, just to integrate with data sync. But then we also have large companies that buy OpsHub for something like data sets, where they have like 100 or even 1,000 sales reps that they want to build data sets for, or they want to connect to Snowflake or something like that. So it's really all over the spectrum. Can you share an example of one of these features that's directly impacted a customer's ROI, or one of your favorite examples? I keep going back to this lead rotation thing, but that is one of my favorite examples so far. We had a customer that used a table in what's called HubDB. So like, we have a place to write tables on the back end of the CRM, and they basically created a table of all these rules and all these different assignments that you'd want to, or all these different assignment rules they had for leads. And instead of like one person, I think it was like an intern going in like once or twice a week and assigning leads manually, they were able to write a custom code action that would go look at that table, reference a zip code, and then see which representative that deal or that contact should be assigned to. So if you think about it in terms of that, so like, hey, I'm not relying on poor Nick the intern to come in twice a week and look through this spreadsheet. I'm now immediately assigning leads instead of twice a week. And we know that it like I think I don't know the exact figure, but like contacting a lead very quickly improves your chance of closing that deal as a customer or closing that person as a customer. So if you think about the return on investment from like immediately assigning a lead with Operations Hub through custom code versus going through and doing that one by one, like that could be a good example there. Do you have some onboarding tips to get an organization or team familiar with Opshub? I feel like sometimes full overviews can get overwhelming for inexperienced users. We do. So I'm excited for this too. I spoke with our Academy team a few weeks ago. We are building an Operations Hub full Academy course. And I think like that's always my default for onboarding for an organization, like put every new user through the Academy courses that are going to be relevant to them. So I'd say when that comes out, for sure. We also have a couple projects, so self-paced projects in the projects tool. If you're not familiar with that, it's under your profile. You can click projects and search data sync and data cleanup. We do have like a step-by-step checklist for getting started with those two tools. So I'd probably recommend that. Any other questions about Operations Hub or breakfast, golf, anything like that?
Great. Looks like the chat is slowing down a little bit, but I did just pop my email address in there. Pancakes or French toast? That's a great question.
I'll answer that real quick. I'm more of like a savory breakfast guy, so I'm more of like eggs and bacon. But waffles, I would agree with Madison. If I had to choose, I'm going waffles. So
there's no carbohydrate product in your ideal breakfast?
maybe a bagel. I don't know. I had grits this morning, grits and eggs. So
That
I'll go
sounds good.
grits for my carbohydrate.
I will share that
And
one of my favorite ice cream brands, it's called Jenny's, and it's out of Columbus, Ohio, which is pretty close to us. They just re-released their everything bagel ice cream. So think about that, ponder it. It's like a cream cheese ice cream, and it has like garlic flavor, onion flavor. It's supposed to be really interesting. I haven't tried it yet, but it's on my
I might
list.
try that.
I think you should.
Before we all left the office, my coworker actually used to work for a Jenny's. She went to Ohio State and would not stop talking about Jenny's, and I've always wanted to try it. So maybe I'll have to try that finally.
It's the best ever. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again so much to Nick and for all of you for joining us. Keep an eye out for a recording in your inbox in the coming days in case you want to share any of this information with your colleagues or revisit everything that we've discussed here today. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. And we are also going to be sending out, once again, a brief survey to the Cleveland Hug chapter, just asking about your preferences on programming for the remainder of the year. So thank you again in advance for your participation. And thanks everyone for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all.